So how do you know when the mix of your song is done? We're going to talk about that today. All right, so how many times have you just struggled over getting the mix of your song perfect? And you've probably found yourself going onto YouTube and watching all these videos, or reading these different blogs on how to carve out the perfect snare drum EQ and how to get your bass guitar to pop through in a mix and all this other stuff. And while all of that stuff is great to learn, I think it's extremely important for us to learn. I think it's also too easy for us to get caught up creating these perfect mixes, because the reality is that they don't exist. Think of it like this. If you have a crappy song with a perfect mix, do you want to listen to that song again? Probably not. But if you have a great song with an average mix, do you want to listen to it again? Of course you do, right? Because it's a great song. It spoke to you, right? It was a satisfying experience listening to that song. So even though the mix might not have been perfect, we still want to experience that song again. So instead of asking, when is my mix done? Instead, the question we should be asking is, when is my song done? Because the mix is simply just one element of the song, and it's just as important as the vocal. It's just as important as the lyrics. It's just as important as the drum groove and as the individual instruments and instrumental parts that are on the recording. But it's just one element, right? It's not the big finale. It's just one element that, when all these building blocks stack on top of each other in the song creation process, that's what ultimately gives us a satisfying listening experience. All right. So one of the ways that I approach my mixes is really quite simple. I've learned through the years that there's like this point that we hit, right, when we're mixing. It's kind of like a little plane here, right? So as we're mixing and as we're creating our song, it gets better and better and better. And we hit this point to where it no longer gets better. We really can't pass through this, right? We basically hit this plane, think of it as like a concrete ceiling. And even if we're able to chip away at the concrete a little bit, there's still rebar and all that stuff in between that we can't get past. So as we get to this point, we start moving to different places on this plane. And at that point, what we're doing is we're not really making the song better. We're just making it different. So if I'm spending a lot of time EQing like the beater of the kick drum, so I can get more of that attack, am I really making the mix better, or am I just making it different? Ultimately, this plane is what I consider the satisfying listening experience. I want to take all the building blocks of my song, and when I stack them together, even with a very basic mix, it should hit that plane. That should be a satisfying listening experience. If I get to that point, and even if the mix isn't all fleshed out yet and all perfect, if it's not satisfying to me, then that means that I have to go back and I have to analyze something that's going on musically. Maybe the vocal performance isn't the best. Maybe the lyrics need some work. Maybe there's something with the instruments, and maybe the drum groove isn't happening. If this is not satisfying at this point, then I need to go back and I need to readdress those other elements. You readdress those other building blocks until it gets to that satisfying point where you're like, okay, even if everything's in mono and all the faders are pushed up, this still feels good. I still like listening to this. This song is satisfying to me. Now I can start mixing it. Now I can start putting all those instruments in the various places that they need to be across the stereo field. And now I can start EQing them so that they, poke out a little better. And, there's no, low frequency, build up and all that other stuff that we ultimately do with mixing. Adding in all the effects and the depth and the spacing that reverbs and delays and whatnot add to the song. But we have to get to this point first during the creation process. All right. So the big mindset shift that I want you to have here is, instead of focusing in on the mix, let's focus in on the song. And the second thing that I want to talk about is, really, we are in a point to where we have the ability, with just a little laptop, with one of these little guys, to be able to do everything we need to do. Okay, a small investment in a laptop. You're probably watching this on a computer, so you already have the laptop. All you need is some software, an interface, a nice microphone, a sound source that you can create with. And at that point, just investing a little bit of time and energy into learning how to run this studio that you have now, on your computer, can be so powerful. And I hear people say often when I talk about this, I'm such an advocate of being able to, record yourself and stay in control of the creative process all the way through the creative process. I hear people say like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have the time to learn how to do that and all that stuff. Okay, I get that. But think about how much time you're actually going to save by learning a piece of software. You know, think of how creatively fulfilling and rewarding it is to be able to come into your studio or just a little, office that you have in your house and be able to put on some headphones and create music and create the music that you want to create. Just think of how much money it costs per hour. Maybe let's just say it costs $100 per hour to go rent a studio to record vocals, and you work a job that you make $20 an hour. Well, you have to work 5 hours for every 1 hour that you're in the studio. So you probably get 1 day in the studio, then you have to record all your vocals, in 1 day, and you can get tired pretty quickly. And then you're around a bunch of people who you don't know, and you're stressed because you're under a time limit. You're shelling out money every hour, and you're around a bunch of people who you don't know, and an engineer, and maybe an assistant, and all this stuff. And so yeah, you might not get the best performance because you don't have time to get comfortable there. But yet, if you can do this in your home, on your free time, when you feel inspired, it could be 3 a.m. with no one around, and you can just do take after take after take, and you can take the time to get your music right. That's powerful. And that's how we can spend time working on our music and making our songs better and making the recordings better, so that before we even get to the mix phase, we've created a satisfying listening experience. So that, to me, is the way to look at mixing and the way to look at recording and music production as a whole. And instead of being scared of it, just realize that it is easier. It is so easy now. It's easier more than it's ever been for musicians to get a laptop or a desktop computer, buy even a $200 piece of software, something like Logic, which is pretty cheap. You can get Pro Tools, I think, for $299 per year. So $200 to $300 in investment into a piece of software. And then let's say you spend a week learning how to use it. They're not super complicated, but then now you have all this freedom to take the time that's necessary to do the work, put in the time, put in the creativity, and get the song to that point that it needs to be in order for it to actually work for you. So moving forward in your own career, stop worrying about the mix so much. Create a great song. When you create a great song, the mix ultimately will take care of itself. But if you can't get to that level, right, to that satisfying listening experience before you even get to the mixing phase and starting to dial in, when you start dialing in all these little elements of the mix, if you can't get the song to that point, then the song is not done. All right? You need to spend more time on the song until you start getting to the mix. So that's what I want to share with you today, and I hope you have a great week.